on a series of lectures given by Nestor Webster, 1876 to 1960, about the origins of world revolutions. The focus of the lectures was to look at the origins of the revolutions and wars that took place from the time of French Revolution. In the foreword from the original first edition in 1921, Webster states the following, amongst all the books, pamphlets and newspaper articles that are now devoted to world revolution through which we are passing. It is strange to notice now little scientific investigation is being brought to bear on the origins of the movement. The original book, as noted, was published in 1921 and contains 10 chapters. The revised edition of this book contains 17 chapters. I. Mirage 2. Illuminism 3. The First French Revolution IV. The Conspiracy of Babeuf V. The Golden Age of Socialism VI. The Revolution of 1848-7. The Interationale 8. The Revolution of 1871 X. The Course of Anarchy X. Syndicalism 11. Marx and Socialism 12. Bolshevism 13. Backed by Gold 14. The Second World 15. The Chinese Revolution 16. The African Revolution 17. World Chaos. At the end of the book there is a chart on world revolutions. There are a number of secret societies that are operating throughout the world. If anyone ever doubted their existence, this book will endeavor to remove such doubt. Even though the original book was written over 100 years ago, it is a valuable historical resource even today because it identifies these secret societies, particularly the Illuminati and the Freemasons, as being the sources of movements toward revolutions and wars in countries throughout the world. The Illuminati is not a conspiracy theory. It is real. The author reveals that Adam Weishaupt, 1748 to 1830, a German philosopher, founded the Illuminati. May 1, 1776. Adolf Frege, 1752 to 1796, was a German writer during the Enlightenment era who was a Freemason and a leading member of the Illuminati before he left this secret society. We learn that there was an alliance between the Freemasons and the Illuminati on July 16, 1782. Weishaupt, who was also a Freemason, originally barred people from the Jesuit order and Jews from joining the Illuminati. That changed in 1791 when Jews were allowed to join the secret society. One notable Jewish society member was Mayer Amschel Rothschild, 1744 to 1812, a German Jewish banker and founder of the Rothschild banking dynasty. Listed in the chapter Illuminism are the 5 aims of the Illuminati. 1. Abolition of monarchy and all ordered governments. 2. Abolition of private property and inheritance. 3. Abolition of patriotism. 4. Abolition of the family, of marriage and of all morality, and the institution of communal education of children. 5. Abolition of religion. The author does not intend to put the events chronologically in this book. Webster's focus is more about the ideologies of the Illuminati, Freemasons and Marxism, and the dangers that they pose against the established morals of our cultures that were based on Christian values. We have available for us documented history of how these secret societies, as well as Marxism, have destroyed civilizations in countries like France, Germany, the Soviet Union, and China, just to name a few. The abolition of religion has had some devastating effects. Weishaupt and Marx were against God and Christianity. The results show that atheism is responsible for the death of millions of human beings by their own government. Further proof that a godless society doesn't benefit the estate of mankind. Nestor Webster did some extensive research on revolutions and wars in her day. After the First World War, the officers of Royal Artillery at Woolwich, which led to the publication of this book. For those who have come to the realization that the New World Order is a reality, then World Revolution, The Plot Against Civilization is an essential read. It provides a historical perspective on the Illuminati and the ideologies that led to the causes of world revolutions. As good as the original edition was, there is plenty of interesting information in the revised version. If you enjoy and appreciate world history, you will not be disappointed in this book.
This book is presented in video format as a review, especially for our commentator that asked us the question, do we know anything about the Jesuits, perhaps an internet conspiracy, the New World Order, their involvement, world domination, control, destruction because of this order. So we looked and we came across this book, especially for the commentator realised, giving us this idea, as we said, as we verified with you, that we'd find something for you and give you the credit for giving us an idea for a new topic. We again thank you very much for that. So here is this book. Hopefully it will help you understand who really is the one trying to create this new world order, be the common denominator leading all the world to self-destruction or destruction. This is a book called World Revolution that we found in the public domain, public access. It's been submitted to the Library of Congress, etc. No copyright infringement was intentional or intended, and we bring it to you all, especially to realise they know who they are, so that you may understand it better and come to your own conclusions and realise who actually is hell-bent on world domination. World Revolution, The Plot Against Civilization by Nestor H. Webster, Mrs. Arthur Webster, author of The French Revolution, A Study in Democracy, The Chevalier de Beaufleurs, etc. Boston, Small and Maynard and Company Publishers. And here's something in French by two people in 1811 and 1889. Author's note: in reply to numerous inquiries as to whether the statements that the author made in the French Revolution have since been disproved, and they take this opportunity to say that as far as they were aware, no one had attempted to bring forward any contrary evidence. The socialist press was completely silent, whilst hostile reviewers in the general press contented themselves with saying the work was biased, but without quoting chapter and verse in support of this assertion. The author's book was not intended to be the last word on the French Revolution, but the first attempt in English to tell the truth, and had this person's view on any essential point been shown to be erroneous, she would have been perfectly ready to readjust it in further editions. No such honest challenge was made. However, her opponents, preferring the method of creating prejudice against her work by attributing to her views she never expressed. Thus, at the moment of this book going to press, it had been brought to her notice that she was represented as having attacked British Freemasonry. This can only have been said in malice, as she had always clearly differentiated between British and continental Masonry, showing the former to be an honourable association, not only hostile to subversive doctrines, but a strong supporter of law, order and religion. See the French Revolution, paragraph 20 and 492. She is in fact indebted to certain distinguished British Masons for valuable help and advice in her work, which she here gratefully acknowledged. Within this book she acknowledged for in that paragraph. Forward. Amongst all the books, pamphlets and newspaper articles that are now devoted to the World Revolution through which we are passing, it is strange to notice how little scientific investigation is being brought to bear on the origins of the movement. A frequent explanation advanced, and the author believed the most fallacious, is that the present unrest must be attributed to war weariness. Human nature, we are told, exasperated by the protracted horror of the recent international conflict, has become the victim of a crisis de nerves, which finds its expression in worldwide discontent. In support of this theory, we are reminded that former wars have likewise been followed by periods of social disturbance, and that by a process of analogy, the symptoms may be expected to subside as the strain of war is relieved, in the same manner as they have subsided hitherto. It is true that political conflicts between nations have frequently in the past been followed by social upheavals. The Napoleonic Wars by industrial troubles in England, the Franco-Prussian War by revolutionary agitation, not only in the land of the conquered, but of the conquerors. But to regard these social manifestations as the direct outcome of the preceding international conflict is to mistake contributing for fundamental causes. Revolution is not the product of war, but a malady that a nation suffering from the after effects of a war is most likely to develop, just as a man enfeebled by fatigue is more liable to contract disease than one who is in a state of perfect vigour. Yet this predisposing cause is by no means essential to the outbreak of revolutionary fever. The Great French Revolution was not immediately preceded by a war of any magnitude, and to the observant mind, England in 1914 was as near to revolution as in 1919. The intervening World War, far from producing the explosion in this country, merely retarded it by rallying citizens of all classes around the standard of national defence. The truth is that for the last 145 years or more, the fire of revolution had smouldered steadily beneath the ancient structure of civilization, and already at moments had burst out into flame, threatening to destroy to its very foundations that social edifice which 18 countries had spent in constructing. The crisis of today, or that particular day, is then no development of modern times, but a mere continuation of the immense movement that began in the middle of the 18th century. In a word, it is all one and the same revolution, the revolution that found its first expression in France of 1789. Both in its nature and its aims, it differs entirely from former revolutions, which had for their origin some localized or temporary cause. The revolution through which we are now passing, or they were passing there, is not local but universal. It is not political but social. It was not political but social. And its causes needed to be sought not in popular discontent but in a deep-laid conspiracy that used the people to their own undoing. In order to follow its course, all must realise the dual nature of the movement by studying concurrently the outward revolutionary forces of socialism, anarchism, etc., and the hidden power behind them as indicated in the chart accompanying this work. The present writer believed that hitherto no book has been written on precisely these lines. Many valuable works had been devoted to secret societies, others to the surface history of revolution, but none so far has attempted to trace the connection between the two in the form of a continuous narrative. The objective of this book was therefore to describe not only the evolution of socialist and anarchist ideas and the effects in succeeding revolutionary outbreaks, but at the same time to follow the workings of that occult force, terrible, unchanging, relentless, and wholly destructive, which constitutes the great menace that has ever confronted the human race. Parts of chapter 1 and 3 appeared in the 19th century and after that particular book, and certain later passages in the Morning Post. Contents. Page. Contents page continued, and then conclusion on page 318. Chapter 1. Illuminism. The philosophers, Rousseau, secret societies, Freemasonry, Adam Weishaupt, the Illuminati, Congress of Wilhelmsbad, Illuminati suppressed. It is a commonly accepted opinion that the great revolutionary movement, which began at the end of the 18th century, originated with the philosophers of France, particularly with Rousseau. This is only to state half the case. Rousseau was not the originator of his doctrines, and if we were to seek the cause of revolution in mere philosophy, it would be necessary to go a great deal further back than Rousseau, to Mabley, to the Utopia of Thomas More, and even to Pythagoras and Plato. At the same time, it is undoubtedly true that Rousseau was the principal medium, this is the go-between, in-between, through which the doctrines of these earlier philosophers were brought home to the intelligentsia of 18th century France, and that his contrat social and contained the germs of modern socialism in all its forms. The theory of Rousseau that has the most important bearing on the theme of this book might be expressed in the colloquial phrase that civilization is all wrong, and that salvation for the human race lies in a return to nature. According to Rousseau, civilization had proved the bane of humanity. In its primitive state, man was free and happy. Only under the paralyzing influence of social restraints has liberties been curtailed, whilst to the laws of property alone was due the fact that a large proportion of mankind had fallen into servitude. The first man who bethought himself of saying, "This is mine," and found people simply enough to believe him, was the real founder of civil society. What crimes, what wars, what murders, what miseries and horrors would he have spared the human race, who, snatching away the spades and filling in the ditches, had cried out to his fellows, "Beware of listening to this impostor. You are lost if you forget that the fruits of the earth belong to all, and the earth to no one." Footnote indicator. It has down the bottom here, discourse, and the rest of it's in French. Something to do with conditions, but we're not well versed in French. We're just guessing at that. In these words, the whole principle of communism is to be found. Beware of listening to the impostor. You are lost if you forget that the fruits of the earth belong to all, and the earth to no one. There is a certain substratum of truth in Rousseau's indictment of civilization, a substratum common to all dangerous errors. For if there were no truth at the bottom of false philosophies, they would obtain no credence, and thus could never constitute a menace to the world. Rousseau's gigantic error was to argue that because there are certain evils attendant on civilization, therefore civilization is wrong from the beginning. As well might one point to a neglected patch in a garden and say, "See the results of cultivation." In order to remedy the evils of the existing social system, more civilization, not less, is needed. Civilization in its higher aspects, not in the mere acquisition of the physical amenities of life or even of artistic and scientific knowledge, but in the sphere of moral aspiration, is all that separates man from the brute. Destroy civilization in its entirety, and the human race sinks to the level of the jungle, in which the only law is that of the strong over the weak, the only incentive the struggle for material needs. For although Rousseau's injunction, "Go back into the woods and become men," may be excellent advice if interpreted as a temporary measure, "Go back into the woods and remain there," is a counsel for anthropoid apes. It would be idle, however, to refute the folly of Rousseau's theories, to show that in nature communism does not exist, that the first creature to establish the law of property was not man staking out his claim, but the first bird appropriating the branch of a tree whereon to build its nest, the first rabbit selecting the spot wherein to burrow out his hole, a right that no other bird or rabbit has ever dreamed of disputing. As to the distribution of the fruits of the earth, one only has to watch two thrushes on the lawn disputing over a worm to see how the question of free supply is settled in primitive society. Nothing could be more absurd than Rousseau's conception of ideal barbarians living together on the principle of "do as you would be done by." Only a dreamer utterly unacquainted with the real conditions of primitive life, the life of rule by the strongest, of pitiless preying on the weak and helpless, could have conjured up such a vision. Footnote indicator. And down the bottom it says here, on the Indian frontier, where still today no laws exist, the inhabitants are obliged to resort to the plan of building towers reached only by ladders wherein to sleep at night, and by ascending into these refuges and pulling the ladders up after them, they are able to slumber in comparative security from assassination. Equality of wealth is maintained by the same primitive methods. "How do you prevent anyone getting too rich?" a British general inquired of an inhabitant of the Swat Valley, where a rudimentary form of communism is carried out. "We cut its throat," was the brief reply. Even 18th century France, with all its avidity for novelty and streams of return to nature, never regarded the primitive utopia of Rousseau in the light of an attainable ideal, and it is as inconceivable that the philosophy of the discourse sur l'égalité should have led to the attempt to overthrow civilization in 1793, as that the mockeries of Voltaire should have led to the feast of reason and the desecration of the churches. The teaching of Rousseau never reached the people to any appreciable extent. His influence was confined to the aristocracy and bourgeois, and it was certainly not the hyper-civilized habitues of the salons, nor the prosperous bourgeois of the, okay, the other word might be bourgeoisie or something. No, from French, we don't know French. Okay, and it was certainly not the hyper-civilized habitues of the salons, nor the prosperous bourgeois of the provinces, nor indeed was it Rousseau himself living on the bounty of the most dissolute amongst the rich and sharing their vices, who would have welcomed a return to aboriginal conditions of life. That would be like indigenous and tribal. Nothing to do with the Australian boomerang thrower or one who goes walkabout. The salons toyed with the philosophy of Rousseau as they toyed with any new thing. Mesmerism, Martinism, magic, whilst the disgruntled members of the middle class who took him seriously used his theories merely as a lever for stirring up hatred against the class by which they believed themselves to be slighted, and never dreamt of emulating the Caribbean savages held up to their admiration by the exponent of primitive equality. It is not then to the philosophers, but to the source whence they drew many of their inspirations, that the great dynamic force of the revolution must be attributed. Rousseau and Voltaire were Freemasons. The Encyclopedia was published under the auspices of the same order. Footnote indicator, there's some references here underneath. Without this powerful aid, the drawing room doctrinaires of the 18th century could no more have brought about the mighty cataclysm of 1789 than could the Fabian Society have produced the world revolution of today. The organisation of the secret societies was needed to transform the theorisings of the philosophers into a concrete and formidable system for the destruction of civilization. In order to trace the origins of these sects, it would be necessary to go back quite 6 centuries before the first French Revolution. As early as 1185, an order had been formed, calling itself the Confrérie de la Paix, with the main object of putting an end to wars, but also with the idea of establishing community of land. In their attacks on nobles and clergy, the Confrères thus expressed their belief in the system now known as nationalism. By what right do they invade the goods that should be common to all, such as the meadows, the woods, the game that runs about the fields and forests, the fish that people the rivers and the ponds, gifts that nature destines equally to all her children. Accordingly, the Confrères set out to destroy the chateaux and monasteries, but the nobles arming themselves in self-defense ended by destroying the Confrères. It will be seen, therefore, that Rousseau, in attacking the rights of property, was proclaiming a doctrine that had not only been preached, but which it had actually been attempted to put into practice in France 600 years earlier. The fact that the Confrères of the 12th century had been thus summarily suppressed did not prevent the formation of further subversive sects. Early in the following century, the Albigeois, professing much the same doctrines, in 1250 a Hungarian ex-priest named Jacobi organised a crusade against the priests and nobles, and at about the same date the Order of the Templars was founded in Jerusalem by certain gentilshommes of Picardy during the Crusades. On their return to France, the Knights Templars instituted themselves as a power independent of the monarchy under the Grand Master Jacques du Molay, rose against the authority of the King Philippe le Bel. In 1312, several of their number were arrested and accused, amongst other things, of spitting on the crucifix and of denying the Christ. In the course of their cross-examination, they declared that they had not been fully initiated into the statutes of the order, and that they suspected that there were two sorts, some that were shown to the public, others that were carefully hidden and were not even known to all the knights. Footnote indication there. And it's basically a reference to a book by the Chevalier de Malin, 1817, page 37. Jacques de Molay and several of the leaders were executed, and according to the Chevalier de Malin, those who had escaped the storm afterwards met in obscurity so as to reknit the ties that had united them, and in order to avoid fresh denunciations they made use of allegorical methods which indicated the basis of the association in a manner unintelligible to the eyes of the vulgar. That is the origin of the Freemasons, and more references to that in footnote below. Martinez de Pascali by Babeuf, page 140. In the above passages, the author has only touched very briefly on the origins of continental masonry, as the subject was recently fully dealt with in the very interesting articles that appeared in the Morning Post during July 1920 under the title of The Cause of World Unrest, a republished in pamphlet form by Grant Richards. This last assertion finds further confirmation from the Martinez de Papus, who explains that the Grand Chapter of French Freemasonry founded in the 18th century was constituted under the Templars. That is to say that the most eminent members are animated by the desire to avenge Jacobus Burgundus Malay and his companions for the assassination of which they were the victims on the part of two tyrannical powers, royalty and papacy. Meanwhile, Freemasonry in England had developed along quite different lines. This is not the place to discuss its aims or origins. Suffice it to say that although French Freemasonry of the Grand Loge Nationale derived from one of these same sources, the Confrérie of the Rose Croix, and received its first charter from the Grand Lodge of London, founded in 1717. The two orders must not be confounded. Perhaps she's saying that you shouldn't confuse the two. They might be quite different. The craft masonry of Britain, which was largely a development of the Royal Guild of Working Masons, has always retained the spirit of brotherly association and general benevolence, which animated its founders, and has adhered throughout to the principle that nothing touching religion or government shall ever be spoken of in the lodge. For the indicator, and it's basically references to a book by a person called Robinson, Proofs of a Conspiracy, page 10. In France, however, as in other continental countries, the lodges speedily became centres of political intrigue. The Grand Orient, founded in 1772, with the Duc de Chartres, later Philippe Hippolyte, as its Grand Master, was an undeniably subversive body, and by coalition with the Grand Chapter in 1786, acquired a far more dangerous character. For whilst the spirit of the Grand Orient was frankly democratic, though not demagogic or gogic, the spirit of the Grand Chapter was revolutionary, but the revolution was to be accomplished above all for the benefit of the upper class. La haute bourgeoisie, with the people as its instrument. The brothers of the Templar right, that is to say, of the Grand Chapter, were thus the real fomenters of revolutions. The others were only docile agents. In the opinion of Papus and of contemporary Masons themselves, the revolution of 1789 was the outcome of this combination. Indeed, the influence of Freemasonry on the French Revolution cannot be denied by any honest inquirer into the causes of that great upheaval. And as we shall see later, the French Freemasons themselves proudly claimed the revolution as their work. It was thus that George Sand, herself a Mason for the Grand Orient from the beginning, admitted woman to the order, wrote long afterwards. Half a century before those days marked out by destiny, the French Revolution was fermenting in the dark and hatching below ground. It was maturing in the minds of believers to the point of fanaticism, in the form of a dream of universal revolution. And footnote indicated down the bottom of a book of reference. The socialist historian Louis Blanc, also a Freemason, has thrown much light on the question of these occult forces. We know, moreover, that George Sand was right in attributing to the secret society the origin of the revolutionary war cry: liberty, equality, fraternity, long before the revolution broke out, the formula liberty and equality had been current in the lodges of the Grand Orient, a formula that sounds wholly pacific, yet which holds within it a whole world of discord. For observe the contradiction. It is impossible to have a complete liberty and equality. The two are mutually exclusive. It is possible to have a system of complete liberty in which every man is free to behave as he pleases, to do what he will with his own, to rob or to murder, to live, that is to say, under the law of the jungle, ruled by the strongest, but there is no equality there. Or one may have the system of absolute equality, of cutting everyone down to the same dead level, of crushing all incentive of man to rise above his fellows, but there is no liberty there. So Grand Orient Freemasonry, by coupling together with two words forever incompatible, threw into the arena an apple of discord over which the world has never ceased to quarrel from that day to this, and which has throughout divided the revolutionary forces into two opposing camps. As to the word fraternity, which completes the Masonic formula, we find that this was added by a further secret society, the Martinistas, founded in 1754 by a Portuguese Jew, Martinez Pasquales, or Pasquale, who had evolved a systematic Gnosticism, Judaized Christianity, and the philosophers of Greece and of the East. This order split up into two branches, one continued by Saint Martin, a disciple of Martinez Pasquales, but also of Jacob Boehme, and fervent Christian, and the other a more or less revolutionary body by which the Lodge of the Philosopher was founded in Paris. In the book of Saint Martin, it's got this in French there, the errors of whatever that verite means, published in 1775, the formula liberty, equality, and fraternity is referred to as l'Éternel Sacré. The Martinists frequently referred to in French contemporary records as the Illumines, or Illumines, were in reality dreamers and fanatics. Footnote indicated down below. 1. The Martinists, whose tendencies were purely scientific, passed frequently for madmen and despised politics. Papers opposite page 55. And must not be confounded with the order of the Illuminati of Bavaria that came into existence 22 years later. It is by this terrible and formidable sect that the gigantic plan of world revolution was worked out under the leadership of the man whom Louis Blanc has truly described as the profoundest conspirator that has ever existed.